Welcome again, everyone, to our final Thursday session. Today's topic matter is aviation. It's hard to believe that 5 weeks have already flown by of our summer, and we're already having our final discussion with a professional this summer. We've had really a lot of really exciting speakers, and today will be no different. As always, you can find all of our past discussions on RePicture's YouTube channel, including those from previous summers, and topics such as designing communities and green energy and many more. So definitely be sure to check those out if you haven't already. And as a reminder, you can also meet all of our panelists on the RePicture platform and find our 2022 program page there. We'll drop a link to that program page here in the chat today. So you can, if you haven't had a chance to look it out, you can check it out. You can go there and see kind of everyone that's been involved in the program this summer, students, speakers, and staff, our peer mentors. We'll always be connected through RePicture, through what we did together this summer through that page. So definitely be sure to check that out if you haven't already. And so for some context for our speaker today, this is part of our 6-week summer STEM Accelerator program. Each week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we have sort of these live workshops where students complete assignments, and then students complete assignments related to the skills we learn about that week. And then, of course, Thursdays, we have speakers come in and talk to our students about their fields. Last week, we talked about resumes and cover letters and job interviews, and we did mock interviews and things like that. And this week we talked about creating and giving presentations. And that's in preparation for next week, our final week, where our students will be giving their final presentations. So I wanted to share with you all that we did create an invitation for the final presentations next week. Students will present about the real world STEM projects that they researched and published on RePicture to a panel of professional STEM professionals. These are really an opportunity for our students to practice their presentation skills and network with professionals. And the presentations are open to all. So all of you are welcome to invite your friends and family and to come see your amazing work next Thursday. It'll be during our regular session at 1 o'clock Pacific for Eastern, Thursday, July 28th. And finally, we'll announce the winners of last week's contest on Instagram in the next few days. So be sure to head over there to check out the winners. A little more context for our guest speaker. Over the summer through the weekly assignments, our students have been building their RePicture portfolios. So they're researching and publishing articles about real world STEM projects on our platform. And through the process, they're digging in and a little deeper to learn more about a field that interests them and sharing the work that they've done in school and at their internships on RePicture. And this becomes part of their RePicture portfolio and profile. Several of our students have used these portfolios to help them get jobs and internships, and they've used them to gain admission to universities and special STEM programs, and they can put that experience on their LinkedIn profiles and on their resumes. And that's it for announcements. So with that, I will turn it over to Mose to introduce our amazing speakers today.
Hey everyone, pleasure to be with you again today. We have a really dear friend, and he's going to be your new friend to add to your roster as well with all our Thursday guests. I met Matthew while volunteering for an entrepreneurship program, and Matthew has a long, rich history from volunteering to publicly traded company to public service. He's been an advocate for entrepreneurship and information technology programs between the city of Ventura County Community College District and the Ventura Unified School District, with a board of directors and advisory roles with the Chamber of Commerce and Alliance for Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, and a board of director and chamber of executive committee at the Ventura Chamber of Commerce, and chair and trustee with the Ventura Chamber Political Action Committee. The exciting thing that brought him to us today is the STEM in the aviation industry. He's the CEO of a new, very exciting startup called PteroDynamics. That he's going to tell you a lot more about, and how STEM play an integral role in creating the startup, and how can you guys also participate in aviation and get an access to the aviation from different backgrounds. So with that, I will hand it to Jerry. Welcome back, Jerry.
Thank you, Mo. It's great to see you. And thank you for introducing Matthew. So to get started with our first question, can you start by giving us sort of an overview of the field of aviation? So what types of works does the field of aviation encompass, and what are some of the types of careers in aviation?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's aviation is well, it's a really broad, spectrum of things that encompasses everything from, what you traditionally think of aviation as Boeing and, commercial airlines like that. But of course, all the defense applications, whether it's, helicopters or Harrier jets and all of that. And about a decade ago, we started to see introducing aviation to the consumer in prosumer brands like DJI and others, where you might get an aircraft that is actually more than a plaything for Christmas or just as a consumer, and so it's really becoming much more approachable, I think, for the general public. In some commercial context, if you're taking videos of and pictures of a wedding, you might incorporate drone technology in that. So aviation really kind of starts at that first level and goes all the way up to manned aircraft or crewed aircraft, as we say now. There are operators like the airlines that operate it. There are technology companies that manufacture aircraft like Airbus and Boeing and Lockheed and Northrop Grumman in both commercial and defense sectors. There's just a tremendous amount of opportunity, I think, in that space and generally. And we're seeing a disruption in the aviation industry like we have never seen since the Wright brothers flew, back in the early 1900s, 1908, I think it was, the Wright Flyer. And there was a big, shift in aviation that happened with the introduction of the helicopter, where you could actually fly around without needing a runway. Another big revolution happened with the introduction of the jet engine, where you could fly, between continents and much larger, longer distances faster. And what we're seeing now is the introduction of electric propulsion and higher energy density batteries, and that's enabling what has come to be called advanced air mobility, which promises to do everything from get you your burrito in 20 minutes in your backyard to air taxis and other kinds of missions like that. So certainly there are opportunities in technology fields for STEM students, but also for anybody in STEM, but in sales and business development, operations management, manufacturing. Somebody that was in the automotive industry with that experience might really be valuable for the aviation industry, because there are 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more vehicles that we need to be built every year in aviation, and so to really capitalize on the full opportunity. So I see it as unsurmountable opportunity for anybody that wants to get into aviation. There's just a lot of fruitful opportunities to pursue there. Awesome.
It's definitely a lot of different things that you can do. It's very broad, but you can find your own interests within all of that. Right. So could you tell us a bit more about what you do and what your company does?
So yeah, around my background is I'm primarily an entrepreneur. I've worked on a number of different startups, mainly in the technology field. What I think I'm good at is seeing opportunities and what market needs are as they evolve, and finding it really works the other way. I see something innovative, and 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, I just say, okay, that's not relevant. But sometimes you say, oh wait, there's an innovation, and the timing of the market opportunity is here. So sometimes innovation without timing doesn't build a business, and it doesn't really provide a viable opportunity. But there are those few times where you see something innovative and you say, oh, wow, I can see how we're just at the cusp of that opportunity. And that happened for me in the late summer of 2017 when I was introduced to the inventor, Dr. Val Petrov, of this new type of folding wing VTOL aircraft that he had called the Transwing. And it's basically an aircraft that can take off and land like a helicopter, but has wings that fold and unfold during flight to transition between that rotorcraft configuration into a fixed wing airplane. If you fly across the country, you fly in an airplane, you don't fly in a helicopter, because helicopters can't fly far, they can't fly fast, they're not efficient for that horizontal flight. But the great thing is they don't need a runway, and they don't need that launch and recovery infrastructure. So since the Wright brothers first started flying, the market's been trying to figure that out, and especially in earnest since the 1950s. And so I saw this transwing aircraft that Dr. Val Petrov had invented back in August of 2017, and knew immediately that this was going to be transformative for so many different industries. And I just, got more to talk with him more. And the pivot for me was that when we came out of stealth mode in 2018 in May at the Uber Elevate Summit. Uber, the car company, was in the center of the universe for air taxis at the time. And we had filed our patent by then. And I wasn't really actively involved in the company, but at the tail end of that conference, it became clear that this was something I really wanted to be involved with. And that's when I became CEO of this company, PteroDynamics. It's like Ptero, like pterodactyl. It means folding or animated, or it means wing really. And then dynamic is sort of an animated or folding wing. And if you go to pterodynamics.com, you can see what I'm talking about. It's if you haven't seen our aircraft fly, you've never seen anything like it. And there are hundreds of companies building novel aircraft in our space, but they all conform to one of 4 different designs. And our aircraft is a profoundly different aircraft, and it has all kinds of advantages. So we founded the company back in late 2017. Val founded it before, and then I came on as CEO in May of 18, and have been full-time ever since. And we primarily are focusing on the defense industry, working with the United States Department of Defense and the Navy and other branches within there and our allied nations, but definitely working on introducing aircraft into the commercial market as well. And that's sort of a dual use technology, and that's our dual phase right now.
Awesome. That's really great to hear. I know you're sort of talking about how you're in the aviation industry. Your background's more like entrepreneurship. So could you tell us about how you've gotten to where you are today, such as something in your early education or first job, or what do you think influenced this direction that you're in?
I was lucky, I think, in that I ended up living in France growing up. I went to the American School of Paris, and they had a different view about education, where they really kind of allowed you to pursue the things that you were most interested in and didn't force other things upon you, except for French. Everybody had to take French for an hour a day. But I found that I really liked STEM. I like math, chemistry, physics, all the sciences, and got an opportunity to sort of excel in that. And then when it came to go to college, I started as a mechanical engineering major at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. But I was a hustler in high school, and sort of as an entrepreneur, I had all kinds of businesses. We weren't a wealthy family, and I had ambitious goals. And so I wanted to buy a drum kit, I wanted to buy a motorcycle, I wanted to buy a car, I wanted to do all these things, and my folks couldn't just buy those for me. So I had to find out how to do that. So entrepreneurship has been always just a core part of my being. And very soon after I started as a mechanical engineering major, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur instead, but in technology fields. So I switched to Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, which was one of the few schools that was 1986 or 87 that had an accredited entrepreneur program, and really focused on that, and have been an entrepreneur hardcore since I quit my regular job and started a company in 1994, and have been an entrepreneur ever since. So mainly in technology fields and software development, but also biodiesel production. And also I ran a quant hedge fund, using mathematics to trade financial securities in an automated way. And really feel like this is the opportunity of my lifetime. It's I'm a passionate patriot. I want our country to be safe and secure. And I think that this is really important for our ability to defend our country and for our allies in the defense of democracy across the world. And I think that's an important thing that drives me as well. I wouldn't use what I just said, though, to infer anything about my politics, because you might be really wrong if you try to do that. But I think that this is a valuable thing for our country, but also for commerce. I think that certain technologies can be really important for the benefit of a country, and like AI, whether it's AI or other things. I think drone technology, autonomous aircraft technology, will become a strategic asset for different countries, and I want to make sure that the United States is on the forefront of that as well. So that's one of the things that I think that drives me personally.
Awesome, that's great to hear. And that actually goes into my next question of what do you think the future of aviation looks like? And that's what you were sort of getting into. So which areas in particular, if you wanted to go into more detail, do you think are expanding the most, or you predict to expand the most?
I think when you think about aviation, if you look at the bigs flying from on an Airbus or a Boeing airplane across the country with Delta, United, or whomever, I think that's really not changing that much. A lot of people see a lot of opportunity in electric aviation with more regional airports and urban air mobility, getting your burrito in 20 minutes and doing the air taxi. I'm actually not a believer in any of those things anytime soon. Regional airport use is not being held back by electrification of aviation. Gas-powered, aircraft can do that really well right now. And if there was a true demand for that, I'm not a big fan of getting people out of their cars where they're spending 65 cents a mile to get in air taxis are going to cost $6 a mile. And there's a lot of regulatory challenge there. Where I do see things changing is in other things like being able to do middle mile logistics, making critical deliveries to remote areas, high value cargo that's time sensitive to hard to reach places where people are already spending a lot of money doing that today. And also in a regulatory environment where you can operate with freedoms, because there's still substantial hurdles in any sort of traditional type of logistics transport using aircraft. If you want to fly in the national airspace, United States or in Europe or anywhere else, flying from a hospital in Cleveland to a clinic across town over kindergarten playgrounds, there's a lot of obstacles in doing that. So where I see the greatest opportunities is maritime deliveries from the coast to ships at sea, to offshore oil and gas, or onshore missions from Alaska, from Anchorage to remote mining operations where you're flying over the tundra where they're just polar bears. I think that's where the need is the greatest. You can get to those business opportunities very quickly. The people are spending a tremendous amount of money doing it in a way that can take literally 100 times. You can take 4 days to do a trip that you can do in an aircraft in an hour and a half. So that's where I see the greatest opportunity market-wise. Certainly in the defense arena, we're seeing large manned aircraft missions being replaced by smaller unmanned aircraft that are substantially lower cost, 1 or 2 orders of magnitude lower cost to procure and to operate. We have a contract at our company with the U.S. Navy to deliver aircraft for a critical repair mission. So right now, they fly these missions. If there's a ship out at sea that is having there's something wrong with the ship, they need to deliver critical repair cargo. This happens thousands of times. 48% of the time, they're delivering payloads less than 1 pound. What aircraft do they use to deliver those missions? V-22 Ospreys, the huge aircraft with the rotating, tilting ducts. They cost $85 million to procure and tens of thousands of dollars to operate per hour. A crew of 4 just to operate the aircraft, or an H-60 aircraft, which is a $30 million aircraft. Half of the time they're delivering this, right? But it needs to get there, so they do that. So we're seeing more of these missions being replaced by smaller aircraft that are uncrewed, that are fully autonomous, that are lower cost to procure and operate, as well as to maintain. So I see that as a major trend.
Awesome, that was very informative, and I definitely am learning a lot already. And you had mentioned the importance of aviation in defense, but could you talk a bit more about how some of the other ways the aviation field helps people?
How it helps people?
Yes.
Right. Well, it's anytime you want to move, something from here to there, that's the only reason why an aircraft is valuable. Sometimes that thing is cargo or humans, but sometimes that thing is a fixed payload where you're doing some other kind of a mission, like maybe you're doing linear inspections of power lines and pipelines and rail lines. We have a company here in California, but PG&E, right, that went bankrupt because they had a catastrophic fire in California that was attributed to their one of their transformers that blew up and started this massive fire and caused billions of dollars worth of damage and a lot of deaths. That company went bankrupt because of it. I think that they're coming out of bankruptcy, but like, that's a profound thing. Why did that happen? Because it's very expensive to inspect these power lines. And there's, most utilities, they have tens of thousands of miles of power lines. And ideally you want to inspect them every year, right? Before the winter comes, as the branches are growing, which branches are encroaching on the power lines. So when the snow comes, they're going to break and cause a fire, or the wind, whatever it is. So if you can do those missions, it's like they're aerial robotics there. And so there are lots and lots of missions like that, which are just profoundly valuable to do. So it's transporting people, transporting things, but it's also patrolling our border in a natural disaster situation, delivering emergency goods, water, medicines to remote areas. If we had these kind of aircraft in Katrina, how different would those things have done? What went on in Haiti, with all the hurricanes and earthquakes and different things, to being able to deliver not just humanitarian relief, but setting up emergency communications. When there's a natural disaster, all of the cell towers, they all get saturated, right? Your internet goes down at home, everybody's on their phone. Well, if you're an emergency responder trying to communicate with command to decide where you deploy assets to put out a fire, they're suffering by the same congested networks. So the ability of a company, AT&T has this contract called FirstNet, a 25-year contract obligation with the government to deliver emergency comms in those situations. Sometimes you can set up a tethered drone and you don't need to fly horizontally, but if you need to take off and land without a runway on demand and send an aircraft over a fire to set up an LTE tower or some other sort of comms emergency communications relay. Right now, they're doing that with manned aircraft, with crews, in an aircraft and on a manned aircraft that has been adjusted for that. That's dangerous for that pilot, right? So they can't do those missions all the time. They can't go into the most dangerous areas, and it's very expensive to operate that. So those are some examples of ways that we can have this new advanced air mobility type of aircraft doing those missions. Remote search and rescue, you're the sheriff of a county and you want to fly 220 miles that direction, and you don't know if the hikers are out there or what the situation is, and you end to send up a helicopter to do that. Well, instead you could for a tenth the cost, you can send 10 of these aircraft covering 10 times the space for a lot less cost. So those kinds of missions are valuable.
Awesome. And you've mentioned like a lot of different tasks or like abilities that can be or different things that can be addressed through aviation. So what are other fields that typically work closely with aviation professionals, or what does that team sort of look like?
Well, it's a really great question, because there are component technologies that are being developed outside of the traditional aircraft company. So we're an aircraft design and manufacturing company, but we rely on another company to provide our flight computer and our flight management system. We rely on another company to deliver the technology for precision landing, to be able to find a ship at sea, match its speed and bearing, and land on the deck. We work with another company that does detect and avoid, and other companies that help us with EMI protection, so that if somebody's trying to interfere with our aircraft's operation by jamming our communications or interfering with the communications within the ship, like from the flight computer to the electronic speed controllers to the motors, how do we protect against that? So there are all of these other industries on a technology basis that all come together to make a truly autonomous flying robot work. Artificial intelligence is a really big part of that. Sensor technology, if you're trying to sense methane gas, or EIOR cameras to do electrical optical imaging, or just infrared, other things. So we see a good analog for us is the autonomous automobile industry. You've got Waymo and Zoox and Tesla and all these companies. They may not build the lidars that are on board and all the other components. So the same kinds of technologies that are getting together to make that happen. And so that's the aircraft platform. And then there's a whole group of companies that are focused on vertiports. If you want to fly and land in downtown Los Angeles, there's a company that's a vertiport company that's lots of those companies are trying to set up that kind of infrastructure around the world. And then you have the service providers. Who are the companies that are going to actually operate these vehicles? If you think about the traditional airline industry, you've got the vertiport companies are the airports. And then you got the manufacturers are like Boeing and Airbus and Embraer, and then, or Gulfstream and, all these other companies. And then you've got the operators. So Delta, United, Southwest, and those companies. And so I think that we look to nature, Mother Nature, to get inspiration to find out what works. In a lot of ways, you can look at prior businesses and prior industries and treat that like Mother Nature, like as a species. What is it about frogs that made them successful, and try to learn from that? In a lot of ways, in business, you can think of other companies and other industries as if you were a scientist or biologist looking at Mother Nature. So what business models have evolved? And the airline industry started back with the Wright brothers in 1908. And so how did the component technologies and component partners evolve over the decades to have something that works really well right now? And we can look to that for inspiration from a business mind and say, well, let's not reinvent the world. Manufacturers are not also operators who also don't own airports. And I think some companies in our space are making that mistake. We're seeing some companies that are both planning to build and operate aircraft and also be the ones to operate the service. If that was a really good model, then probably Boeing and Airbus would be operating services, but there's channel conflict. And so that's one of the things we just, as a business person, I try to learn from the sort of the natural evolution from a biological standpoint of business.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask a few more questions about some advice you might have for people who are interested in aviation. Well, I guess that was kind of the question, but what advice do you have for someone planning to work in your field, or what should they do to prepare themselves to be successful?
Follow your passion, right, is a cliche, and I won't say that, but I will say that you need to do something that you like doing and that you're good at, right? So, I know people that really want to be musicians, but they're not a great musician. So that's not enough. You got to do what you want, and you got to be pretty good at what you're doing, or have the capacity of getting better at that. I think in STEM in particular, and even STEAM, if you add the art component, people are often very sort of inward, introverted, left-brained, like able to focus on something and really excel at that. And I want to emphasize how important it is to be able to express yourself, talk to other people, build relationships. Relationships in your network are so important in every industry. I cannot think of anything where that is not really important, to have those relationships and to be comfortable talking with other people and getting out there. Your network, when people think about, oh, who's right for this problem? Somebody asked me for advice, and they're looking to hire somebody. They're going to go into their mind and say who it is that they know that's going to do that. And that's where you're going to find your best opportunities. The opportunity I'm in right now is because I mentored a relationship with an engineer that worked with me 10 years before I got introduced to Val Petrov. And because of that relationship, when Val asked him, hey, I've got this technology, I want to turn it into a business, who do you know? That's who my friend thought of, was me. And so that's the reason why I'm in the opportunity that I am right now. And I think you can't underestimate the value of that. And definitely don't if you want to be an engineer and your folks want you to be an attorney, don't be an attorney unless you really want to be a lawyer. You got to follow what you want to do and avoid doing things that you don't want to do and that you're not good at. Because sometimes I'm a drummer. I've been drumming since I was 9 years old, and I'm not the best drummer. I could never be, in a band. But so, that's the wrong, I can't just follow that passion because I just wasn't going to be good enough to do that. So I think you need those two things. What do you want to do? And what do you think you'll be able to be good at?
Awesome, thank you for that. And looking into more like internships or jobs in aviation, where do you suggest students go to learn about that job or opportunity?
Well, if you're in college, there's always a career center at the college, and a lot of companies that are hiring, have jobs posted there, especially internships. Unless you want to travel for your internship, you want to be looking locally wherever you are at school or wherever you're living. So you can certainly go to your local chamber of commerce to find out what companies are in your business sector. If you're in college, also just going to professors. A lot of the good professors are ones that have relationships with existing companies. I know I maintain relationships with my alma mater, even though I graduated, in '89, whatever, a long time ago. I still maintain those relationships, and I do get referrals of students that people think would be a fit for my company. So I think that's a good way of doing it as well. And then just work your network. There are always trade organizations. I know that I attend a lot of events and I meet students there and people that have graduated also that are looking to change companies or change fields. And we bump into each other. Just you put yourself in front of opportunity, find out where are the people in the companies that you'd like to work with, where do they go, and make sure that you're there too.
Awesome, thank you for that. I think that'll be super helpful for anyone who is looking into aviation or honestly anything else that they might be interested in. So also, of all the projects that you've worked on during your career, what has been your favorite and why?
So, I really think what I'm doing right now is the most important and the most exciting and has the biggest opportunity. Most of what I do, there's always some social benefit component to it. I think that our company will have a profound impact on reducing carbon emissions in the world. I think our aircraft design, this transmit, enables you to do more missions and still staying within an entirely electronic battery operated footprint, all electric aircraft. Even as we move into some missions that are basically generally longer range, we can scale up to as big as you want and still stay electric, but you bump into this limit of what is your range and endurance with an all electric aircraft, because you just don't have the energy density. You've got 14 times the energy density in a liquid carbon fuel than you do in conventional batteries today. And even when you account for the loss of efficiency in combusting the carbon fuel like gasoline or any petroleum-based fuel and converting it into mechanical energy that you can use in your propellers and your rotors and whatnot, even with that loss, you still have many multiples the energy density. So it's just like electric cars. The first electric cars couldn't go very far, but the difference with electric cars is you could just make them heavier. And if you run out of energy, you kind of pull off to the side of the road. You don't fall out of the sky. And then when you add in vertical takeoff and landing, it's 6 times higher because you need 6 times the energy to take off and land without a runway than you do if you do have a runway. So just adding extra weight. So that actually means that our aircraft platform, this transwing platform, is that much more valuable because since it has so much more efficiency, we can do more on batteries. So that limit of where we kind of can no longer do all electric. But even to the extent that you introduce liquid fuels and burning carbon, we have a more efficient aircraft, so we're going to be burning less carbon to accomplish the same mission. We can do more with smaller, lighter aircraft that are also lower cost to procure and operate and maintain. So, I think that, getting your question, what's the most important thing? I think that the philanthropic side of me says this is the most important thing I'm doing. And the business opportunity-wise thing, I think that every vertical takeoff and landing aircraft in the world 15 years from now will be one of ours, unless you need to just fly around and not travel laterally, you don't need to fly in a wing. And those will be aircraft that are either made by us or by our partners that we license to. We're not trying to boil the ocean ourselves. We're very much leaning into trying to partner with other companies to bring this technology to market.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And also, so before I ask this question, I just want to let everyone else know that's watching. Feel free to put questions in the chat, or maybe use the raise hand feature if you would like to ask questions, and we'll open up Q&A in a few minutes. But back to the question. This week, we talked about creating and giving presentations, and students will be presenting their projects to a panel of STEM professionals next week. So have you had to give a lot of presentations in your career? And if so, do you have any advice for giving a great presentation?
So yes, I've done a lot of it. I love doing it, and it's really critical. And everybody needs to realize that every time that you are in front of somebody, you're making a presentation. If it's having cocktails, if it's dating, whatever it is, you're doing that, right? So the key to success, besides relationship building, like I talked about, is communicating. If you've got this greatness inside your body, and you need to express it to other people in a way that they understand it, and so that they can feel what you're feeling, and that's a presentation, and that's persuasion. And the more genuine you are about it, like I'm not one of those guys that can just sell anything. Like, I have to believe in it. I just can't get passionate about it, and I can't bother. Right? It's like I'm no good at it. And so, I think that one of the big pieces of advice that I have about any sort of presentation, especially a formal presentation, and I think this is a formal presentation, right? It's scheduled. I got people that are here either because they want to be or they have to be because of their class, but whatever it is, it's formal, or whether you're on a stage. That if we're thinking about something like that, the good advice I have, or important advice I have about that, is to make sure that when that snap happens and you're going to talk, that you're confident about what you're saying. So don't bite off this huge topic that you're really not familiar with. If you're given this big topic, try to pull it down to something that you can come into that conversation feeling confident. Because if you do, then you really don't have to prepare that much, because you're just talking, it's coming out from what you already are experienced about. I've had to give presentations on something that I'm not fully up to speed on. Those are the most difficult for me, the most uncomfortable, and the ones I'm worst at. So if you have an opportunity to shift the topic to something that's really in your wheelhouse, or constrain the topic to a topic you're comfortable speaking about, then it just becomes a conversation and not a presentation. And it's like anybody that's ever done theater. If you miss a line, you miss a cue, nobody knows about it unless you let them know you know about it. So if you're talking about something, just, shift the answer a little bit different than the question that was asked, or shift the topic to something that you're comfortable speaking about, because ultimately you want to deliver something that is of value to people in the audience, and they're not going to find value in something that you're not knowledgeable or good at.
Right. That's definitely true. I've had to give a lot of different presentations, and definitely have had the most fun, and it's been the most comfortable presenting on something that is something that makes you excited. So yeah. Moving on to another question, is that we've talked a lot about personal brand, and that was something that was touched on in the earlier weeks of the summer. But what is your perception of your brand, and has your brand changed over time in your career?
Yeah, has it changed? I don't know. I had this weird phase. Something shifted for me when I moved back to the United States from Europe. I was born in a very small, town in Massachusetts, and, wasn't worldly or anything like that. And all of a sudden I'm living in Paris and going to the American School of Paris, and, meeting, kids whose fathers are ambassadors or who knows what. And like, it just for me, it shifts like, oh, wait, the world doesn't revolve around white male Americans, and got a world view. And that was really important for me and enlightened me. And just for what I've always embraced is diversity. The more diverse people that I'm able to interact with, that I'm able to bring into my company, bring into my orbit, the more value I find in all of that. And even in diversity, you might think, culture and race and religion and, perspective and on, but it also relates to industry. Dr. Petrov, who invented the transwing, he's a postdoc PhD smarty pants, and I mean that in the most flattering way, but what he does not have is an aeronautical engineering degree. Math, chemistry, physics, right, and nonlinear analytics, that's where his education's been. But his passion for more than 40 years has been experimental aircraft. He's made all kinds of innovations. And if you look at every industry, you see that that's where disruption lives. Where does the disruption come from? It's really smart people who have not been told all the answers to the questions in that field. And so they have to go into their brain and figure out new answers. Like Airbnb didn't come from hoteliers. Like, who would have thought of that? Elon Musk, famously did not come from the automotive or the space or the rocket industry, but he's a smart guy. And so, in terms of my brand, what I pride myself on is being genuine, strong ethics, moral compass, being, transparent, being, just, I tell it like it is. And I try my best. I don't have any enemy that I can think of in the world. I did battle with one board director a couple of companies ago, and that was probably the only thing I can even point to. And we could still get together for beers. I think, in terms of my personal brand, it's a hard question. I'm scrambling here to answer it, I think, but I just try to do the best that I can and be honest with the people that I work with.
That's awesome. Thank you for that answer. So we're going to have a few questions from some of the peer mentors as well. So Lindsay, would you like to go first?
Sure. So thank you again for coming today. And the question I have for you is, has anything surprised you about your career, such as what it's actually like versus what you imagined it would be like when you were studying in school?
Yeah, I guess I thought that in school there are a lot of blueprints. They teach you how to do things and how things work. And it's one of the challenges that I had with engineering, because it was so practical and applied. I wanted to be more creative. I love the engineering fields, but I wanted to kind of break the rules and disrupt things. And I think that that was, when I went into college, I was thinking that there were going to be just, there's a book about every topic. There are all these business books, just follow the rules and learn how to be successful. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that when I was making decisions, not necessarily on the fly, but just like adapting in real time to the things around me, and the other people that I saw being successful in the world were also doing the same. Remember, there was a time when Jack Welch and GE, there was like this blueprint for how to be successful in business. And we found out years later that actually was absolutely like the wrong formulaic process, is what caused GE to be so overexposed in 2008 during the financial crisis. And this idea of systematically taking the top 10% that you in your business unit and promoting those and firing the bottom 10%. And what you end up doing is you're training people, your employees to be prescriptive in how they behave, and that takes all of the innovation off the table. And so GE was the last company that was being innovative in the market. They were getting crushed in every market they were going into until they broke that mold. And so for me, that was probably the biggest thing that I thought. Business was very formulaic. It's been around for a long time, so stick to the formula, and that's how to be successful. And the more I went forward, the more I realized that the more I broke that mold, and the people around me that were breaking that mold were the ones who were truly leapfrogging ahead. And you had to just be a human being and be an adaptive person as a species. And that's how you're going to win in the game.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for asking the question, Lindsay. So I can go to, well, I see Abdallah just raised their hand, so we can go there, and then Jim, if you want to ask your question next. And Abdallah, you can unmute yourself.
Afternoon, sir. Just like to thank you for coming to this meet, and I have one question for you regarding your project on the Loyola aircraft, fixed wing, multi-rotor. Have you like experimented in how different fuel types affect different forms of aircraft? For example, a diesel on a fixed wing versus an airplane that runs on rotors, and how those fuels affect mechanical efficiency and, necessary gear conversions needed for diesel. For example, diesel provides more torque in a multi-rotor. I'd assume that would make it lift higher. Have you looked into those, and what differences do you find, and what applications do you think you could make for diesel aircraft? It being a very sustainable fuel.
Okay, you're broke up a little bit there, but if I could repeat the question the way I understood you asked it, you're asking how do different fuel types affect VTOL aviation? You've got heavy fuels, JP5 and that kind of thing. You've got certainly gasoline, diesel applications as well. And like with terrestrial or land-based engines, you've got diesel trucks that can carry, have a lot of torque and can carry a lot of weight. They're compression ignition. They're typically heavier and whatnot. I would say that the particular things that we think about with respect to aircraft are two things primarily. One, you typically build aircraft around existing engine systems. Like instead of me just sitting there with the CAD software, not me, but our engineers, and saying, oh, this is the perfect aircraft size and dimensions, and so we're gonna go find an engine that fits this. Instead, we really can't do that because the cost of developing an engine that's going to have commercially viable, what they call, TBO, time between overhaul cycles, is not going to happen. I'm not going to go to Rolls-Royce or to GE Aviation or whoever's and have them build an engine for our use. So typically you have a notional design, generally this size and weight. So what engines are available within that, and then we'll build the aircraft around that. But then the other component is also who's the customer and what's the mission. We can't have gasoline burning engines for an aircraft that's going to land on the deck of a naval ship because the fuel is too volatile, right? They want a heavy fuel that they already have on the ship because they don't want to have to do any retrofitting or changing on the ship to be able to run operations involving that ship. So that's a big way of us, a big constraint when it comes to that. So the short answer is we really don't have the kinds of freedom in designing an engine system or using an engine system that you might think. So we have to work with what's currently on the market and what the customer requirements are. And also, if you think about maybe not landing on the deck of a ship, but if you're going to land at an airport, where do the fixed base operators, the FBOs at the airport, what kind of fuel do they already have? And then there's also a shift to the desire for renewable fuel systems, lower lead-based fuels within aviation. So within the VTOL business and our aircraft, we have to live within those same confines. We cannot expect the industry, defense or otherwise, to have a whole set of infrastructures that's going to be for our particular needs. We have to say, what is the art of the possible already within these industries, within these missions, and adapt our aircraft for that. So, but more to the engineering question, just a few more seconds on this. There is really nothing different about VTOL aircraft versus fixed wing aircraft that use a runway or a rotorcraft, pure rotorcraft like helicopters, that make it particularly different for a VTOL. A vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, like any other rotorcraft, needs to lift up more than its own weight in thrust. So if it's a 10,000 pound aircraft, you need like 13, say 1,000 pounds of thrust. If it's a 10,000 pound airplane, not a rotorcraft, you only need maybe 3,000 pounds of thrust to go down a runway. So there's nothing on the fuel side of things that is a key distinguishing characteristic where we would tend to want to go towards a heavy fuel or a gas fuel.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And then Jim, for your question.
Hello, thank you for being here. So my question pertains to what sort of advice do you have when it comes to building a professional network, whether that's, whether you're in high school or in college or, in the young professional sphere. And on that same topic, how do you maintain the relationships that you build?
Yeah. So I've got kids and it's like pulling teeth trying to get them to do email, but that's the way business is done these days. You can't maintain relationships on Instagram and TikTok, right? Or even by texting. So you need to get comfortable with email, but that's only once you have the relationship. So, you got to get out there. You got to go network, go to trade events. There are trade organizations in your field. In aviation, there's AUVSI, there's the Vertical Flight Society, and they all have regional chapters and they all have events. They have conferences. You can go there and network with those people and then maintain those relationships, through email and just, staying in touch and attending other events. I'm here today because I started this relationship with Moaz, several years ago, and he was introduced to me through a really high quality contact. And the more I got to know him, the more this relationship developed, and he's introduced me to prospective investors. I got a chance to present a couple of weeks ago at an event that he was involved with because of the relationships we're developing. And he has me here at this event because the relationship that he, the time he invested in the relationship with me. And I love the opportunity to speak and with all of you as well. So you got to start the relationships, you got to maintain them, and just communicate. And don't be afraid of email. You're not going to avoid it. You will not be successful if you don't lean into the email.
Thank you. And thank you, Matthew, for being able to attend this session. So one question I had was, what do you wish you had known, I guess, about your career or in general, when you were in high school or maybe college?
That's a tough question. I guess I'm tempted to say I would have started with entrepreneurship right away, but I don't think so. I think that it was important for me to be able to go and scratch the itch in engineering and really confirm that I didn't want to be an engineer. I wanted to be a business person in an engineering field or in a technology field. I think that one of the pieces of advice that my father gave me, because he knew I was such a entrepreneur hustler guy, that I was, there was a risk that I would never get a chance to work within a structured organization. And that was what he said. He said, look, Matthew, I know you want to go out and start a company and do what you want to do on your own, but think seriously about going and working for an existing company, especially a big company, to learn how they work. And, just you're going to learn so much by being in an environment where things are done a certain way, instead of you going out and just not knowing how to do anything and trying things and making mistakes along the way. And so it's not that I didn't really know that, but I was just driven to go do my own thing. And I'm glad that I did go into that engineering field at the beginning in my education. And then also working, I spent 3 or 4 years working for bigger companies. I was a business major, so I didn't go to an inexpensive college, and it was expensive, and I had a lot of debt. So I chose to work in the accounting field of all things. It's definitely not my DNA, but it paid about 50% more than any other job that was paying at the time. I was a forensic accounting at what at the time was called a big 8 accounting firm, Coopers and Lybrand, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. But I did get this chance to work within a big structured organization with hierarchies and departments and all of that. And I did learn what was good about that and what was not good about that. And even working in the entrepreneurial field, some of these companies have been my own, and some have been others where I was brought in by investors or brought in to take over a department and grow that. And you learn a lot on your own, but you'll learn more and you'll learn faster and you'll learn with less cost and pain and consequences by being in an organization where you can not make the mistakes, but just learn by the way that things already work well. So to the extent that you guys are, going out and thinking of doing something on your own, I would encourage you to go work for a company that is the kind of company that you aspire to work in or to have as your own, or in a field like that already, where you're going to not have to learn from your own mistakes and all the consequences of doing that. So I don't know if that's really a great answer to your question, like what did I think differently or learn that I thought differently about in high school, but I guess just to temper my passions and to try to learn from others that were already doing it and companies that were already doing it, than trying to break all the rules and make the mistakes on my own.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for your question, Michael. And we're just about at the top of the hour. I don't want it to go over. So maybe we call it there. I'm not sure. But I do want to thank you, Matthew, for spending this hour with us today. Definitely learned a lot about the different paths within aviation, and really appreciated all of the advice for networking, giving presentations, and more. So again, I wanted to thank you for spending the time with us today.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Matthew and Jerry, for hosting the questions. And we have like 10 other questions we want to ask you, so we'll just have to do this again.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Moaz. Good to see you.